I am Stephen Roberts. I am one of the hosts of ADHDerpCast. I am trying something new today. I want to see if I can get my own thoughts out. It's something I've been thinking about doing for a while. Recording my own video, seeing if I can have some chats about my own stuff that's kind of separate to the main podcast with Harv. And let's see how it goes. So what I want to talk about today, there's a few different things. And this is a video I've tried to, or a podcast or a recording that I've tried to do a few times. And I want to talk about coffee, and I want to talk about ADHD and people with ADHD and their relationship with coffee, because there's a very intrinsic link between the two. And I've wanted to look at it for a while, and I never really found the right way to do it in a kind of a back and forth way. So that's why I want to do this. I want to kind of get my own thoughts out. And I'm sure it can be part of a bigger discussion at a later stage with the main podcast. But for now, it's just going to be about my feelings with it. So I'm a big coffee drinker, and I wasn't always a big coffee drinker. But it's kind of evolved, and it's now gotten to the point, and we've talked about this a bit on the podcast, it's gotten to the point where I have my caffeine and coffee intake is pretty high. So I will have somewhere between 6 and 10 cups of coffee a day, and that's generally ground coffee in a cafetiere. It's a pretty big amount, and I'm not overly loyal to particular coffee brands. Although when I was doing the surrogacy journey with my husband, that was something that changed, because I was over in Canada and I absolutely fell in love with Tim Hortons coffee, and that's not widely available over here in Ireland. So recently I drove up north to Belfast to visit a friend and to visit Tim Hortons. And I stayed with a friend and bought an awful lot of Tim Hortons to keep me going for a while. When I was in Canada, I think I bought like 4 or 5 kilos worth of coffee to bring home. And that did me a while. But I'll need to be making regular trips back up to Belfast to keep the coffee stocks supplied. So the thing about coffee and ADHD, a lot of people think when they hear how much coffee I drink, or that I drink coffee well into the evening, they think, oh, you must be wired all night, or you must be like fizzing with energy. And that's not the case really at all. I'm not, I've never found coffee to be something that like excites me, or like gives me like a spike of energy, or gives me a buzz. And a lot of people say that it wakes them up. For me, I always kind of, like, I went along when people were saying that, but it never really resonated with me, really, because for me, coffee was more of a soothing drink. Or now it would help me focus, whereas a lot of people would talk about it making them jittery, or that they'd lose focus, or they'd just be bouncing off the walls. I always found and kind of equated coffee with more a sense of like a warm hug, or like it would bring me down a step, or it would just kind of calm the racing in my brain. What I found out later on was that when I was drinking coffee before I was medicated, is I was kind of using coffee to self-medicate. And that's why my consumption of coffee was going up and up and up, because coffee, or caffeine, is a stimulant. And the majority of ADHD medication, or the medication that treats ADHD, not all of them, but the majority of them are stimulants. And when people who aren't neurodiverse take stimulant-based medication. Now, I'm not saying this as any kind of medical professional or anyone who has any kind of medical training. I'm saying this from the point of view of someone who is experiencing these things and someone who has like done a little bit of look in this kind of stuff, but I am by no means a medical professional. But when people who are neurodiverse, particularly with ADHD, take stimulant based medication, it helps kind of create a singular voice in your mind, and it helps kind of calm down the racing. It helps with focusing on one thing. When our brains are so active all the time and they can't really find the point to focus on, or they can't see what way their thoughts are supposed to go, so having a stimulant based medication like that can really, it kind of helps with laser focus. It brings those thoughts into a more coherent single strand or several single strands that you can focus on sequentially, and that really helps with bringing those thoughts to the forefront and allowing you to focus on individual parts. So that's why a lot of people will kind of gravitate towards coffee when they have ADHD. Some people, when they then get medicated, will drop off the caffeine. Some will kind of balance it out into a more reasonable level of consumption. I've kind of been up and down, like with life. Life is always bringing its own ups and downs. There's always different things. There's always things to deal with. There's always struggles. There's always things to prepare. Even with working on the podcast, that's been an ongoing, constant process where we're working on different things at irregular hours. So it's been kind of like we'll be drinking coffee to keep our focus. Well, I can't speak for Harv, but I'll be drinking coffee to keep my focus, because sometimes we'll be like on calls or working on things till like 11 at night. And drinking coffee in that way isn't to keep myself awake, because I've never really had that impact with coffee where it's affected my sleep or it's kept me awake or I need coffee to keep myself awake. When I have coffee, it helps me focus. But I can have, like, if on a typical night, I can have coffee at like 9, 10 at night, go to bed at 10:30 and fall asleep quite happily. I've never struggled with sleep in terms of caffeine consumption. And that's something that I found kind of goes across the board with other people who are, I'm not sure if it's like neurodiverse, but it's definitely other people with ADHD can drink coffee or consume caffeine into the evening. But that might just be, it might just be ADHD. It might be other aspects of neurodiversity as well. So that's something I really wanted to discuss, and I was thinking about different ways I could do it, and doing like a 1-minute TikTok didn't really get the information I wanted out there, and I didn't want to dedicate a whole episode to it with Harv, because we generally have topics that we want to discuss, and I didn't want to kind of sideline any of the topics, but I figured this was still an important one to talk about. So that's why I figured I might do this and give this a go and see if people are interested in listening to me ramble about my own thoughts, my own feelings, separate to Harv, but still under the ADHDerpCast umbrella, because it's still relevant discussion, but hearing from just one person sometimes is better than having the two of us ramble in your ear. There's a couple of other things that I want to talk about. So as I said, I'm a heavy coffee drinker, and that is something that I was using to self-medicate and to deal with ADHD in like the pharmacological kind of way, or not pharmacological kind of way. But the other way I was dealing with ADHD prior to medication and prior to education, because now that we're doing this podcast, I try and educate myself, and I'm trying to learn more about ADHD. And that's the big thing. The big thing that I've kind of found from doing the podcast is that learning is a constant. It never stops. It's like every episode when we're talking about it, when we're researching our topics, when we're discussing what we're going to talk about, there's always different viewpoints, there's always different perspectives, and there's always different ways to look at things and new information to learn. And that's been the key. So it's like the other kind of thing that I used to deal with my ADHD prior to diagnosis and prior to medication. I've kind of like on and off over the years, I've gone to therapy, I've done CBT. Different methods worked, different ones didn't. But again, the constant that was through this, and it was kind of a form of escapism, was gaming. And that's also another trend that runs through people with ADHD, and again, neurodiversity as well. But I'm only speaking in terms of my own experience, which is ADHD and impulse control disorder. Gaming for me has always been an escape, a release, a way of shutting off the outside world and letting my brain just be. It kind of did the same aspect, just not chemically, as coffee did. It would let my brain focus. It would let me collect my thoughts. If there was any kind of stresses or anything I was dealing with, I could play a game, not be thinking, just be focusing on the game. And that would allow me to kind of process what my thoughts were and are, and because I still do it. And it would let me kind of just come to terms with whatever was going on. But it's still something I do. It's still something, like, my husband Graham will know if I am overly stressed, if I'm finding things tough to deal with, or if I'm feeling overwhelmed. Generally, I'll pick up my Steam Desk, or I'll play a few PlayStation games. I don't have a great deal of time to focus on it. And there's kind of a few running jokes with some friends who are also gamers that I jump from game to game to game to game to game. And I was having a game night with one friend of mine where it was kind of like takeaway food, a few drinks, a few games, Mario Kart, that kind of thing. But he was playing a Legend of Zelda game that he hadn't played before, that I brought over. He was playing Link Between Worlds. I brought over my 3DS so he could play it. And I was just bouncing back and forth between different games while he was playing that. And he said, watching me was just like, I'd start a game, I'd play for 10 minutes, I'd jump to another game, I'd jump to another game, I'd jump to another game. And that's kind of always been the way I play. Like, it's very hard for me to focus on one game for a long time if it's not engaging enough, or if it's not dynamic enough, or if it doesn't change enough. I found, like, the last game that I probably was able to do that fully and commit hours to was Breath of the Wild, which I got so completely absorbed in. It's hard now because I'm a parent as well to find that kind of time. But another game, and I've talked to Harv about this, and it's something we're kind of thinking about, and we might explore at a later stage. But another game that kind of holds me in that kind of way, because there's not really much expectation and you can just lose yourself in it a bit, is Minecraft. And it's something I came to relatively late. I know Harv has invested a lot of time in Minecraft. I didn't really. Years ago, I never really saw the value of Minecraft. And I'd see people playing it, and I was like, there's no point to this. You're not doing anything. There's no driving storyline. There's too many gaps in storyline. There's no barriers. There's no boundaries. But when I actually picked it up, and I got it for the Switch. No, it wasn't actually the Switch. I got it for the Steam Deck. And I just started playing for a few hours. and I got so absorbed, and it completely took over everything I was doing, and it got that switch off that I was talking about, because I was able to focus on just laying these blocks down and building a house and going and searching for redstone and looking for diamonds. And it was like, it gave me back what gaming used to give me back when I was a child or a teenager. And it's something that I think we're going to look at different ways that we can bring that in, because I think there's a lot to be said for the conversations you can have with friends while gaming. I think it's a free space, and especially if Harv's on the same page as me, where we both get that kind of focused mindset, or that sense of escapism, or that kind of more relaxed element, I think that could lead to some pretty interesting conversations. So that's something we're going to look at maybe exploring in the future. I will, if there are any more details to share about that, I'll happily share them. But I have a few more topics that I want to talk about in these kind of segments. I'm not going to do it now, but there's some different things that I want to talk about. There's things like the oversharing, which is a very common thing with ADHD. I want to talk about a bit more about the impulse control disorder. I know that's something that Harv doesn't share. He wasn't diagnosed with that. There are still aspects of impulsivity that he does have, but specifically around the impulse control disorder, how that affects me, what that means for me in terms of how I dealt with it growing up, how I addressed things, and how I used that to process things, and what that meant for me when I got the diagnosis. So there are going to be future episodes of these kind of smaller self-contained episodes, but for now I think we will leave that topic there, and please keep an eye out for more of these, and thank you very much for listening. Join the chaos. Please feel free to follow, to like, to subscribe. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know what you think of the wider podcast itself. We absolutely do take any and all feedback on board. We have active conversations about it. In the first episode of the podcast, we weren't sure about swearing and cursing, and there were a lot of fucks thrown around. We weren't sure how that would be received, so they were bleeped out. We then learned that people found that quite jarring, so we left them in, and that was a direct result of feedback. So if there's anything that you got value from with this, let me know. If there's anything that you think I could change, any topics you want me to talk about, let me know, and we'll see where we can go from there. But again, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more in the future.